Greetings, Starfighters. Welcome to the next episode of Shameless Cashgrab. Today's episode, we're going back to the 70s with Crypt of the Living Dead. Now, based on the description on the back of the box, this is, as I said at the end of the last episode, not a zombie movie. But then again, these things have lied before. For all we know, it could be both vampires and zombies. That could actually be kind of awesome.
Okay, before we get into this, you're going to notice that a lot of these screen caps are in color. I bring this up because the version that is on the Mill Creek DVD is not. This was the version I was watching while I was taking notes and while writing the script. So, if at times it seems like I'm talking about a different movie than what you're seeing in the images, that's because, in a way, I did. Anyway, plot summary, courtesy of IMDb this time. Not that it's any more accurate than the letterboxed one, but two archaeologists on a scientific dig come across a vampire burial ground and discover that the creatures are about to awaken and attack a nearby village. Creatures, it says, plural. There is literally one vampire in the tomb. One. As a matter of fact, yeah, we have another movie with alternate titles, folks. You know, if there's one thing I can say about the beach movie set from last season, is that all those movies were pretty easy to find on Letterboxd because they didn't have like 3 different titles that they went by. Yeah, the alternate title for Crypt of the Living Dead, well, one of the alternate titles is Hannah, Queen of the Vampires. Some versions also call it Young Hannah, Queen of the Vampires, and I think I saw one thing that called it House of the Living Dead. But, you know, I'm going to say straight up, I actually think Hannah, Queen of the Vampires is a better title for this movie than Crypt of the Living Dead. I bet it got changed by a distributor that was trying to ride George Romero's coattails. I mean, this was 1973. This was well after Night of the Living Dead became a cult hit. But anyway, after a pre-credit sequence reminiscent of old PBS productions of Shakespeare plays, we get something for about 2 minutes. Pretty sure there was a guy in furs running around, but it was a little too dark to tell. I'd originally written in my notes, apparently no one told the filmmaker until after shooting that black and white films still need to be lit. This was before I was aware that this movie was actually not filmed in black and white. Why they released it in black and white? I have no idea. So the guy in furs, sort of looked to me like early 18th century American fur trader, something like that. Well, he basically goes boo to a guy with a gun patrolling the grounds of this big-ass house that I actually initially mistook for a museum, because the transfer from color to black and white was very, very bad. But he sends the guy with the gun plummeting to his death down a hole of some kind. Or a cliff. I couldn't really tell. Bad lighting, unfortunately, is something of a leitmotif for this movie. Or, actually, no, you know what? I'm not going to blame the lighting. I'm going to blame the conversion to black and white. Finding out that this movie was actually filmed in color was a bit annoying because it basically meant I had to throw out like a third of the script to this episode. But, let me see, let me just get back to the script, see if I can find my groove again here. Oh wait, guy with the gun isn't dead. He just fell and landed on some rocks and had no reaction to it whatsoever. He also suddenly has an oil lamp with him. But moving on, he finds the titular crypt of the movie with the also titular Hannah presumably in it. Well, I mean, titular Hannah if you're watching this movie under the original title anyway, but now the gun guy is dead after being strangled by a monk. By the way, I did mean what I said previous episode about using characters' names for these episodes more often, and, you know, I'm going to keep to that once the movie actually starts giving me names. So after the guy with the gun is dead, we see a man in a suit on a boat. On a motherfucking boat. Headed for the shore of whatever location this movie takes place in. I think it's supposed to be an island. Yeah, I love this scene already because I can actually see what is happening. But after the guy in the suit, who I guess is our main protagonist, gets off the boat, we watch him watch the boat leave. And I mean it. We go back and forth between the guy and the boat for more than a minute until the boat is out of sight. They show us, like, every second of the boat leaving the island. It's just, did the filmmakers think we'd wonder why the boat wasn't there anymore once the guy moved further inland? I probably wouldn't be thinking about these things if the movie had given me more to work with. Unlike some YouTubers, I don't go out of my way to look for things like this. Quite the opposite, in fact. I generally try to avoid looking for things like plot holes and continuity errors the first time I'm watching a movie. I mean, and let's face it, there are probably some glaring plot holes in the movies that I've covered previously on this show that I totally missed. If I did, feel free to leave them in the comments. I like to learn things. But stuff like this movie, it is so upfront that even someone who is largely trying to stay in the moment, like myself, notices. That's not something you want. You don't want someone who is honestly trying to avoid finding plot holes or... Actually, no, I shouldn't even call this a plot hole. This is just bad filmmaking. You don't need to have the camera on the boat for that long. But regardless, it's not something you want from your movie. And I also apologize for using the term plot hole wrong. I know, I'm part of the problem. Anyway, we learn, after some weird behavior from the locals that probably ties into the plot, our protagonist is here about his dead father. Thankfully, Show Don't Tell actually works this time, so we can figure out without clumsy exposition that gun guy from earlier is said father. Of course, we learn this before we learn our protagonist's name. This movie is really stingy on naming people, I gotta tell you that. And we get an awkward time jump. That or bad editing. I'm going to go with bad editing. It goes from day to night and changes locations, but the conversation topic between our still unnamed protagonist and Peter, the guy who carted said protagonist up to the church. Oh, by the way, it was a church, not a mansion or a museum. I might have known this if I could have seen the damn thing. Where was I? Right, the church. Apparently, the guy with the gun was working on restoring an old church on this island when he was killed, and the monk and the fur trader guy, hunter-looking guy, whatever he is, they made it look like an accident. So the mystery of how exactly our protagonist's father died is well underway. Well, the protagonist's mystery, the audience already knows this. But the mystery is underway, and we still do not have this guy's name. I'm serious. We've already spent more than half of the runtime up to this point with this guy, and we don't have a name for him. I mean, if there had been a stylistic choice and we never got his name through the whole movie, I could have respected that, even if it does seem a bit unnecessary. I mean, Sorry to Bother You had a pretty important character never give us his name. In fact, his name actually gets bleeped. But that movie was in my top 3 for 2018. This movie is not Sorry to Bother You. And it's definitely not sorry that it's bothering me. Anyway, sorry, couldn't resist. So, Peter, being one of the few characters to actually get a name in this movie, info dumps about Hannah's background, while a slow fade-in, which, credit where credit is due, is very nicely done, reveals that Hannah is alive and well, just asleep, in her crypt and having been sleeping for 700 years. Boy, there are some days where I just wish... Anyway, still no name for the protagonist, even after we meet our first non-vampire female character of the movie. And this conversation about the protagonist's father and Hannah and the history of the island has apparently been going on this whole time, which, by my reckoning, has been almost an entire day, somehow. And the timeline of this movie is getting to be about as nonsensical as All-Star Batman and Robin. What time is it, movie? By the way, the woman's name is Mary. So we have a Mary, and we have a Peter... Nope, I won't go there. Too easy. I really hope my viewers are either old enough or at least know enough about music that I don't need to explain that reference. I'm just going to take a side moment here to point out that there's some pretty good music in this movie. Of course, the music is playing over a scene where I can't tell what is happening because of the crappy transfer, but... After all of this, something interesting, well, or at least interesting that I can see, happens when the protagonist hears a noise and goes into the kitchen to find that someone has taken his recently deceased father's head and put it on something that's spinning. Or at least that's what it looks like. Actually, I can't blame the transfer on that one. The camera is actually zoomed in too close to tell for sure. We also see guy in furs, fur trader, Craven the Hunter looking guy. Yeah, I'm just going to call him Guy in Furs for the rest of this thing, because I don't think he ever gets a name. We see him from earlier, and we also hear laughter. I think we're supposed to think that it's the guy in furs that's laughing, but his mouth and his head aren't moving, so I don't know. I got nothing. But, the protagonist is understandably a bit put off by this, and when he sees the guy in furs through the window, chases after him. He loses him, though, because the movie is only about a fourth of the way through. I mean, because the guy in furs is so sneaky. Yeah, that's it. That's definitely what it was. But after bumping into Peter, they head back into the kitchen, and the head is gone. So either Peter is in on a plot to make the still unnamed protagonist think he's going bananas, or the hunter guy and the monk are doing it on their own for some odd reason. If it turns out they're trying to trick the protagonist into opening the crypt, my eyes are going to roll so hard it'll hurt, because they totally could have opened it themselves. We go to the next morning, which is good because we can see things again, and our protagonist has apparently managed to dig his father's grave without a shovel. I kid. Just because we don't see it in frame doesn't mean no shovel was used. Some things can be inferred. Why, yes, that was me throwing shade at certain YouTube film critics. How did you guess? We learn that Mary is a school teacher, and a couple of the kids in her class are acting weird. I'm sure that'll be important later. Protagonist comes by, and for a second acts like he's flirting with Mary, but then really suddenly turns it into almost a shouting match about science versus faith, and protagonist guy is whining that by Mary suggesting his father was starting to believe the legends about Hannah, that she is accusing him of being a pagan. Ah, yes. Using pagan as an insult. Don't see a lot of that in movies these days. Which is a good thing. But back to this movie. This very boring movie. Skipping ahead a bit, they open the tomb, well, partly, and protagonist sees Hannah's body intact after 700 years and is still skeptical. Okay, Scully. She didn't open her eyes, so I guess he just thinks that her body was perfectly preserved somehow. We do see Hannah opening her eyes later. So much later that one wonders why the locals, who were so afraid of her most people wouldn't help lift the tomb to try and get the rest of protagonist's father's body out from under it for a burial, didn't try and stake her at any point. Oh, right, someone says later that the top of the crypt is only part of the way off, so they can't actually get to her heart without opening it further. Okay, you know what, movie? I'll give you points for that one. Not a lot, as it actually should have been said sooner than it was, but points are points. So she wakes up, there's some fog, and now she appears to be outside, and also a wolf. Yeah, fine, I'll go with it. At least the music in this scene is nice. Now the question here is Hannah the wolf, or is she controlling the wolf? If she's still in her coffin, who was it in the woods? And man, the editing is making this part needlessly confusing. And this old man character telling everyone it was Hannah's wolf that killed his dog is boring. Honestly, I'm aware his speech is important to the plot, but it is so droning I have trouble paying attention. It's just like, it was Hannah. She killed my dog. She will kill us all. We must do something. Well, okay, so, I wasn't having trouble paying attention. I was actually having trouble caring. We've got to go as fast as we can, he says, while talking slowly and walking even more slowly out of the pub. Yikes. Oh, hey, and the guy in furs is back, and he kidnaps Mary. That excitement lasts a whole few minutes before protagonist, and seriously, we're almost halfway through the movie, and I still don't know this guy's name, what the hell, rescues her after guy in furs tries and fails to ambush him. So that was seemingly pointless. At this particular point, I had a realization. We had a few minor characters, and also a dog, have their names spoken. But they weren't said very clearly, so I couldn't actually make out most of them. I'm starting to think that maybe this is the deal with the protagonist's name. Maybe they actually did say it earlier, and I just couldn't understand it through all the mumbling and the fake accents. At least that's my current hypothesis. And, okay, I'm going to walk back something I said earlier. Given how much effort it took to get that crypt open in the first place, and then only part of the way, I'm starting to think maybe the monk guy and the guy in furs actually did need some convoluted scheme to get someone else to open it. It's a plan that required an awful lot to go exactly right, but honestly, I've seen dumber plans in better movies, so I'll roll with it. Now, I'll save my eye-rolling for the inevitable romantic subplot between protagonist and Mary. I mean, hey, he's been a condescending prick to her for believing in vampires for the whole movie. Clearly it was meant to be. Ugh. And Peter watches through the window during the love scene. Ugh. And creepy. Yeah, I should mention that despite being the title antagonist, literally all Hannah has done at nearly 47 minutes into an 85-minute movie is lie there, occasionally flutter her eyes open, and breathe open-mouthed a few times. And this is reminding me of Count Dracula and his vampire bride. Christopher Lee did almost nothing in the first half of that movie, as you may remember. Still more than Hannah has done, though, so I'll give that movie that much. Okay, the movie only just now told me, or just told me clear enough for me to hear it, that Peter and Mary are siblings, and oh god, that is making the watching through the window thing worse. The last thing I need is for this movie to get all Game of Thrones on me. And now Peter is talking about his past drug problems. Okay, movie, you gotta earn something like this. You don't put a speech like this in a cheaply made vampire movie where the vampire lays there like a waspy housewife for almost 2/3 of the runtime. Oh. Chris. 49 minutes and 35 seconds in, someone said his name for the first time. Or for the first time that I can actually hear it. And I replayed the scene to make sure. The protagonist's name is Chris. Okay, good. I have something else to call him. And hey, look at that! Somebody is finally making a stake to kill the vampire. About 2 days after her crypt has been opened, and she still hasn't moved. I guess she's as bored with this movie as I am. That leaves the killing of the guy making the stake and the slow old guy I mentioned earlier to the guy in furs and the monk. Seriously, this is a vampire movie, yet the vampire's only kill so far is an old guy's dog that she somehow killed without leaving her crypt. Her henchmen, by contrast, have killed 3 people already. One of them off-screen. Yeah, at least it's not as bad as with Adam Age Vampire, where nearly all of the kills were off-screen. And now Chris is apparently being hypnotized by the statue of Hannah on top of the crypt. Okay, I call shenanigans. It is too late in the movie to be giving the statue powers, too. No one suggested it did. And it didn't try this on anybody else earlier. And there have been lots of people in this crypt over the past several days. Especially since the only thing the statue has him do is pull away the flowers that are around the crypt. Apparently it's some kind of special flower that repels vampires. But removing those flowers is enough for Hannah to teleport out. And I mean it when I say teleport. Chris rips away the flowers, quickly moves to the lid of the crypt, and sees that it's empty. So she didn't even turn into a bat or mist and fly/float out. Well, it's like Chris is no longer a skeptic, which is understandable given the circumstances. So he runs to the local pub or wherever, and he yells that Hannah is loose, and to the villagers' credit, they all spring into action with nary an I told you so. And Hannah finally kills someone herself, over 60 minutes into an 85-minute movie. Off-screen. Oh, this is becoming a depressing theme over these last few movies. Oh, and it turns out that Peter was the killer monk the whole time. Okay. In a better movie, I might have had an emotion at this reveal. Maybe not a good one, but still. But the locals continue their hunt for Hannah, which I'm sure would be interesting if I could see it. Chris has managed to kill the guy in furs, though, so that's one less henchman to worry about. At this point, the movie has actually started to improve story-wise, which, you probably wouldn't have guessed from my snark. The action moves at a respectable pace, and the music isn't terrible. It's just all undermined by the baffling choice to take a color movie and present it in black and white, and then not even transfer it to black and white well, because I spent the whole time watching the movie before I started collecting pictures for it, thinking that it had been filmed in black and white and was just poorly lit, and... Okay, now I'm rambling. I will say, having the main vampire be silent for the whole movie, and... okay, apart from some yelling, but... she doesn't talk, is my point. It was clearly a stylistic choice here, as opposed to the Hammer horror movie from a few episodes ago, where I'm guessing they just didn't have Christopher Lee on set long enough. Execution matters, and for all this movie's faults, they did get the silent antagonist thing right. Ultimately, Chris manages to destroy Hannah. Peter is killed by the villagers in one of the movie's very few on-screen deaths, though not in that order, and Chris and Mary leave the island together. As for how, not how they left the island, that's by boat, that should go without saying. How Chris manages to kill Hannah is by throwing an oil lamp at her feet, catching her robes on fire. This is not as anticlimactic as it might seem, though. She's been out of the crypt for all of one evening, and the kind of lamp Chris was using didn't exist yet when she went in. So she gets set on fire and tries to rush at Chris, but he dodges, and she goes right over the edge of a cliff. This doesn't kill her right away, but it fucks her up enough that Chris, once he gets down to the beach, is able to stake her with little effort. But oh, wouldn't you know it, apparently Hannah turned one of the girls from Mary's class into a vampire. Off-screen, of course. This scene, with the reveal of the kid and the fangs, it actually is pretty well done. So, I'll give it that. It is followed by the end credits, which feature still images of... Okay, I got nothing. None of this stuff was in the movie earlier, so this isn't like, a recap kind of thing. Yeah, I honestly have no clue what any of this stuff means. It's like a girl who's not the schoolgirl or Hannah is, looking down on a guy dancing shirtless but looking like he doesn't want to be dancing, and just... Yeah, again, no clue what any of it means. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. The sound is cut out more than a few times. Not sure if it's the disc or just the print of the film. I could believe either, to be honest. Wait, they gave the Best Editing Oscar to Bohemian Rhapsody? Really? Oh, sorry, I was watching this movie and writing the script on Oscar night, and... Okay, no, not one scene from that movie I saw had anything approximating good editing in it. I know this has nothing to do with Crypt of the Living Dead, but come on. Took me almost 45 minutes to realize it, but Chris totally has a John Holmes mustache. The score to this movie isn't bad, but it's not consistent either. It sort of slides back and forth between being really good and so generic that you could switch it out with music from another late 60s, early 70s horror film, and most people probably wouldn't notice. Final verdict. This movie, or at least the version of it on this set, has just enough good things about it that I'm confident in saying that even with 3/4 of the set left to go, this won't be at the bottom. I'm sure I'll find this set's equivalent to My Mom's a Werewolf or The Beach Girls sooner or later, but this definitely ain't it. And if it does somehow wind up at the bottom anyway, well, at least for once the bottom spot in the season wrap-up episode will be worth more than just one word or a pair of obscene gestures. Of course, let's be real, I'm almost never that lucky. Ultimately, I can't say this movie is terrible, but I really do feel like I missed out getting the black and white version. Maybe if I get to see it in full color at some point, maybe I'll like it better. Who knows?